Now, thank you, Pam. Well, good day, everybody, and welcome from around the world. Nice to have you with us again today. As always, I like to start with a few hot topics. We'll try to move through these very quickly. The first one on the agenda this morning is the Derek Chauvin case, which was verdict was granted yesterday, came down, and it was concluded that the officer was guilty in the case, and the thing that I think is really important in addition to the verdict was that we sidestepped any issues and problems here in the United States. It looks like at this point in time as it related to any uprising. This weekend marked a hopeful statistic in America's fight against corona. After months of limited vaccine availability, every adult in the country will now be eligible to sign up for vaccination as of Monday this week. So that's great news. Looks like about 130 million adults are in the queue right now and have done it, and about 85 million, or about a third of all of adults, are now fully vaccinated. Jumping around a little bit, in the Netherlands, restrictions are easing for the first time since January. As of April 28th, 6 restrictions are easing in the first major step of reopening the country. Although it does appear that Efteling is going to remain closed until about May the 10th. Now, following a pause with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that everybody's been talking about around the world, it will now resume, and it's being shipped to the European Union, Norway, and Iceland after the European Medicine Agency said the overall benefits of the vaccine really outweighs the risks. So that's good news. Get a vaccination as soon as you can. On the other hand, COVID situation is still very dire in India, which accounts for a third of all the new infections worldwide, and it's still running rampant down in South America. COVID cases in Japan are on the rise again, and we're watching the theme park industry over there. There's some possibilities that some of the parks may be paused for a while, and we're still watching to see what's going to happen with the Olympics. Even though it's been announced that it's going on, there's a lot of protest over in Japan about that. Back in the U.S., Florida parks remain open for the most part, with attendance managed by reservation systems. Face coverings required, temperature screenings, the capacity limitations, and social distancing requirements will all be in place for a while, but that's okay. People are somewhat used to that, and it's allowing us to get open as an industry. Out in California, parks are following the state's tier system in their opening plans. Magic Mountain opened on April 1st. Universal Studios just opened on the 16th. Knott's Berry is opening to pass holders on May the 6th and to the general public on May the 21st. And Disneyland and California Adventure reopening on April the 30th. Over in Europe, Europa Park is not open, but hopes to open by May 17th, and we wish them well. Disneyland Paris remains closed, however, with no opening date at this point in time. Blackpool Pleasure Beach just reopened last week, and the other parks in UK are following suit now. Down in Spain, Warner Park has reopened, and parks in Italy, it doesn't look like they're going to be open until about July the 1st. So as I said, it's kind of a mixed opening and closing situation around the world. On the travel outlook, 2 recent reports show that the airline industry in the U.S. is starting to bounce back. March showed an 82% increase in net sales over February, and this represents the 3rd consecutive month of positive sales growth and 120% increase compared to March of 2020. So that's really good news, and we hope it kind of continues in that direction. Now, domestic trips last month were up by 50%, and even more telling, international trips were up by 66%. And according to travel analysts today, 72% of Americans say they're ready to travel and get going again. The mindset's there. and that's up nearly 20 percentage points since the start of the year. So we're seeing all types of different movement as it relates to travel. The State Department yesterday actually came out and said that 80% of the countries worldwide, as it relates to our travel, are now marked as do not travel. So, and France came out this week and said that they are going to reopen to international travel and would be lifting their restrictions here in May. So literally, travel issues are up in the air. And it looks like it's going to remain that way for a while until we see further vaccinations taking place around the world. Today, we have a great topic and a great guest. My guest today is Denise Beckson. She's senior executive with the Morey Organization in New Jersey, one of our real treasures in our industry. Morey's, as all of you know, is a seaside park operation consisting of 3 amusement parks, Piers, if you will, and 2 beachfront water parks in the Wildwood, New Jersey area. Denise has been with the Morey Organization for over 20 years and worked through many different capacities during that period. She started out as a lifeguard at Morey's while in high school. That was her first job. And she currently oversees corporate human resources in their water park operations at their parks. She's very active. She sits on IAPA's Education and Government Relations and North American Regional Advisory Committees. She actually chairs the Government Relations Committee. She serves as a director of the Ellis and Associates International Aquatic Safety School. She's been a speaker at industry conferences throughout the country and actually internationally. She's been interviewed by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and all of our periodicals in our industry. And she's a recipient and well-deserved of the IAAPA Meritorious Service Award for what she's done for our industry. She's a native of Westchester, Pennsylvania, and when she's not busy doing all these things we've talked about, she likes to travel and scuba dive a little bit. So, Denise, welcome to I'm for Fun. I'm so glad you're here today. Couldn't have you at a better time, actually, with what's going on in the industry. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing really well. It's great to be here today. I appreciate being asked, and I really look forward to the next hour. I always enjoy speaking with you, Dennis.
Well, you've been a great asset to the Morey's organization, and you've been a great asset to IAPA. And when the need arises, you're always there, and it's been like that for years. And I've seen your participation and your contributions, and they've been amazing. I want to dive right in. Really, when you and I talked and we set this up, we didn't know exactly where we were going to be at this point in the industry, and there are still a lot of things, as I said, up in the air. But I think, Denise, that having you on today couldn't come at a better time, because we're going to talk about human resources and government relations and unemployment and employment in our industry is certainly one of the biggest issues that we face. We employ a lot of people, as you know, domestically and internationally. We're a huge contributor to the GDP of the world. And as we know, labor is our single biggest expense typically in an operation. It approximates about 50% of our operating expense. And I always have said for years that the employees are they're what breathes the life into all of our operations, large, small, indoor, outdoor, whatever. So maybe let's start out with a little bit about Morey's and what you all have experienced through the last year. I'm I'm sure it's been similar to what some of our other guests have experienced. But and what Maurice has done and what you've done to maintain, keep, attract, and make the employee base know how much we like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly a relevant topic, especially right now as we head into our seasons and we're all out here pounding the pavement and hiring and looking for live bodies. So for those who don't know, Maurice is in Wildwood, New Jersey. We have about 150 full-time employees, and we swell in the summer to 1,500 seasonal employees. And we hire about 1,000 of them domestically, and 500 of them are on an international exchange program. What we saw last year as we, headed into the pandemic and into an operating season, once we got approved to open, was a real lack of workforce. So where we normally hire 1,500, last season we had about 700 all in.
Wow.
We had to, yeah. So we only opened one of our two water parks. We had one pier completely closed and one pier was only open at night. And then another pier was fully open. And even in order to do that, we had to call upon our full-time staff to do shifts outside. So we had carpenters that were working grills. Our CFO was selling admissions. Everybody was outside. Our payroll manager was running a game. So, everybody had an outside field job so we could try to, recognize as much revenue as possible with the limited staff that we had. We were really hopeful heading into this year that would rebound. I think last year's issues were from a few different areas. Dennis, the unemployment supplement last year was $600 on top of the state unemployment.
Yes.
So for New Jersey, that was $32 an hour. So that's pretty difficult to compete with. And then you had concerns. People, some of our retirees and teachers didn't want to work in this environment, during the pandemic. And we had parents saying they didn't really want their kids working around this many people. So heading into 2021, we thought, okay, we'll have vaccination rollout and people should be more comfortable with working. And I think what we're finding, not just here at Morey's, but from talking to my colleagues around the country, is a real labor crunch. Really very, very difficult to fill our rosters, and not just, in our industry, but, across industries. Yesterday, I was on the virtual advocacy day for the National Restaurant Association. And it was one of their main points that they can't get enough people. They can't fill their rosters. And it's really a challenge that we're facing as a nation right now.
We were talking a little earlier, you and I was telling you, one of our large restaurants here in Cincinnati, and I'm not only involved in theme parks, but in restaurants here too. And he said to me, Dennis, if we were able to, they're operating at 50% capacity at this restaurant. He said, if we were told tomorrow or next week we could go back to 100% capacity, he said, I can't operate. I can't get it. I cannot find the employees. And what you said, the $600 was an issue. And I'll give you a good example. He said, one of my dishwashers has 5 children, and he just got a check for $7,500 from this last stipend. And he said, do you think he's going to come in on Saturday and Sunday and wash dishes? He said he's not going to do it. So it's a big issue that's facing all of our industries, I think, that particularly employ these younger seasonal and high school and part-time employees. Do you, at Morey's, do you think that let's talk about the J1 a little bit, because the J1 visa, because that's been so important to not only parks and attractions, but national parks and attractions, Myrtle Beaches, Gatlinburgs, Pigeon Forges, Yellowstone, Yosemite, all of the Jackson Hole, where I lived for a long time. We relied on the employees from the J1 visa. And quite frankly, Denise, they were wonderful. They came in, they worked hard, they made a commitment, and they lived up to it. What do you see take some time and tell us what you think and what you see about that J1 visa program. Because when it was paused, it's not just like a light switch. We can go back and turn it on. So what are you seeing from your personal experiences at the Morey Organization, but also from the IAAPA organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked me about it. I'm really glad that you have some personal experiences, interacting with those students, because they are a great addition and supplement to the workforce. So the J1 Summer Work Travel Program, which has been rebranded as Bridge USA, is an exchange program for university students from foreign countries. It's actually first and foremost public diplomacy for the State Department. So it doesn't fall within the Department of Labor, it falls in the Department of State, so that they can have folks from other countries come over, immerse themselves in American culture, and then go back and hopefully have a greater affinity towards America and its citizens, which through surveying we know is true. They come here, they make lifelong friendships, they understand our culture better, they understand our business operations better, and it's really a great experience for the students.
Denise, let me just jump in there at that point. How many of those employees, you've been using those for a while, we all have, how many of those are returnees from a year to year?
Generally about 15%. So it's not a huge number. There's a lot of churn in the program because they can only come while they're a full-time university student.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Limited time period.
Okay.
But so they are, very important to the tourism industry. As you said, amusement parks, and also our national parks. They are, working and facilitating, in the hotels and food and beverage in those areas, and to our communities in those areas, from the Wildwoods in the Jersey Shore to the New England Cape, Wisconsin Dells, Myrtle Beach. And last year, the Trump administration had a proclamation that essentially banned visas being issued in this category. Yeah. So some students got their visas before the ban went into effect, but once the ban went into effect, they were prohibited from issuing additional visas. It was challenged in a court of law, and it was a federal court, and it was enjoined. So the process was able to start again for the winter season, but right at the same time, our COVID cases were rising, and that sort of coincided. So while some students did get in for the winter ski season, it was very limited. Mm-hmm. We were really hopeful with the Biden administration that they would rescind the proclamation. They did let the proclamation expire, but what we're now facing are visa backlogs. So we have, I'm told 400,000 people waiting for visas to get into the United States. And these students are kind of at the back of the line. So we're very, very concerned with being able to get enough people in this summer to have a meaningful program. We need it for our economic recovery. And our ask, as we talk to federal legislatures, has been to prioritize this in national interest for economic recovery, and to waive some of the in-person interview requirements. So through IAPA, we've been getting great meetings with influential folks. We've had meetings with the White House Domestic Policy Council, with the State Department, with our legislatures. We just need to see movement, and it needs to be swift, because typically by the end of April, 70% of these students have their visas or their visa interview scheduled. And right now we're in single digits. We don't have a measurable number. So
when do they typically hit the U.S. soil? Do they come in waves, or do we see them here by July 1st, or what would the schedule be?
They come in waves. So those for the summer season, we see, as early as, beginning of May. A large majority come mid-June. And, and then the same thing happens in reverse when they leave. The students who are here early May are leaving by, the end of August, and it kind of, ramps up and then ramps back down.
Here's a question. We're getting questions coming in now, as we normally do. This one's from Felicia. She wants to know, what do you do at Morey's? Is there a stipend that they receive? Do you pay for their housing? Do they participate in that? What kind of financial program is benefited to them?
So this program is no taxpayer contribution. It's basically student funded. So just like an American student might say, I want to go over to Europe and work or have an experience for the summer, these students are choosing to come and participate in Bridge USA, and they pay for their visas, their flights, and then once they get here, this is the important piece of the program, they're allowed to work. So giving them that work permit allows them to earn money to, retroactively pay back that visa and their costs on it, have money to travel and to purchase things while in the United States. They actually contribute in 2016, $509 million to our U.S. economy. So
How much?
509.
509. Wow. So
The
that's
state of New Jersey at almost 27 million. And they're only here 3 months, so that's quite a contribution for a small period of time.
Do they get any, Denise? Do they get any subsidization on flights or anything through airlines, or is it full fare, coach, or however they travel?
Yeah, they have home country agents that work through their flights and are usually travel agents. So they get some student fares and they have people in their home countries helping them with that. But by and large, they're paying for the program themselves. And then once they get here, they pay for their accommodations and they're paid their hourly wage to work in the park.
Here's a good question that just came in. It said, "So, what are the Denise? This is from Tom. What are some of the challenges of having international workers come to your facilities?"
Yeah, well, that's a great question. There's all kinds of cultural learnings. So I learned early in my career with Bulgarians that this is no, and this is yes. So there were some mix-ups with that. And just understanding, American culture, and you're going to work the pretzel stand. What's a pretzel? There's certainly
That's funny.
yeah, additional training, additional time being spent with them, ensuring they understand American culture, but then also being there for them on a personal level. So they're here, we're hosting them, and we need to be here to help them with things that in their own country, they'd have parents for. So we have kids get sick sometimes, and we take them to the doctor, and at times,
Yeah.
the hospital. And so, there's definitely more hands-on care needed for the folks in this program than for our domestic employees who are going home to mom and dad every day.
Here's another one that's J1 oriented. It said, so staffing issues for the park and attractions are going to continue with or without the J1 or the delay of it. Denise, what are some of the alternatives that you see that would be viable to any new programs to help offset that loss?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
that's from Sandra.
Okay, well, Sandra, that's a good question, and I wish there was a really great solution. I don't think there's any magic bullet. There's not one source of all these people out there that we haven't unturned. It's going to be a lot of little things that are adding up. So for us, we're working with our community vocational school that wants to put kids, into work experiences. So we have grown that program from 30 kids to 80 kids this year. We typically hire less because they are minors and there's restrictions on the hours they can work. But when we know we're going to have this shortage, we'll take what we can get. So we've grown that program. Additionally, here's a creative solution. RWS out of New York. They are a casting company. They cast for Broadway shows. They cast for Ryan Stana's group, and they have turned themselves into a frontline staffing agency. So they've taken those folks that are typically performing, who all those venues are shuttered right now, and recruited them, done training for them, and put together a program to put them into the parks under contract for the period of time that they negotiate with the employer. So
let's do this. Let's give them we normally don't advertise or plug, but that's so important to our listeners. RWS, is that what you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how would they be reached? How could they be reached? Google them.
Yeah, Google them. Ryan Stana is the CEO, and they're an IAPA member. They're an IAPA member too.
Okay, great.
IAPA member directory. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great that's a great
It's a really
facilitator for us and a big help to them, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting outside the box thought. You know, where are people who aren't working, who need to work and who want to work, and how do we get them into onto our rosters? So, we're also seeing people do things like signing bonuses, retention bonuses, referral friends. But like I said, lots of little things to try to pick up folks.
Well, Bernard just sent in one. He said, Denise, are there any tools in the box right now that seem to be working the most to attract employees?
That's a good question. I've asked some colleagues, who have raised the rates, who have done the signing bonuses. What are you seeing? What's the movement? What's the response to this? And I think that folks have said, signing bonuses and bonuses are moving the needle a little bit, but it's the rate that makes the biggest impact. However, even with raising the rate, we're still struggling. So I think we have to, we've all learned over time, it's not just about the money. And I think we have to try to create the most fun environment that we can, the best environment for employees, a culture where people want to be there and want to tell their friends to be there. And that all comes down to understanding the demographic that you're trying to attract and ensuring that you have programming in place for your employees to meet what their needs and desires are. So we know our employees come to us because they want to work outside, they want to work around a lot of people, and they want to meet people. So facilitating that at the workplace through events and programming, those are all the types of things to build your roster and then hopefully, build depth and grow your roster over the years. So I personally think they work very well.
Would you for the foreign employment, back to the J1 just for a second, would in filling your needs, will you expand that number larger than you think it may be necessary? And will you have to curtail or cut back on some of the people that you may be working with coming over? Or do you typically see if you plan for X, do you get a little bit shorter than X, and then you have to fill it? How do you cover that base?
Sure. So our numbers fluctuate based, on our annual need, and the annual need really has fluctuated based on the economy. So, I can tell you in the early 2000s, we were hiring more than we are now. And 5 years ago, it's a little less than now. So, and that's what we've seen with program numbers in general. They move with the economy based on the job rates. In terms of hiring, I always overhire by a little bit because you'll have some students that, life happens, something comes up and they can no longer come, or they get a rejection from the U.S. Embassy. And so we do plan about 8 to 10% over what we actually need each year.
8 to 10, somewhere in that regard.
Yes.
Here's one from Sarah. I wonder who that could be.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. She said, years ago when I was new to the program, we experienced students who would work only a few days or weeks and then just travel to the U.S. Have you experienced this, and how do you find ways to prevent that? So I think what I'm going to tag on here is how do you avoid people just coming for a vacation using this as the fulcrum?
Mm-hmm. No, good question. Thanks, Sarah. I think that it's really clear expectation setting. So we hire all of our J1 employees personally, either on the road or this year, through virtual interviews. And we make sure that they understand that we need them. We're making a commitment to them. We're providing them with this job, and we need them to make a commitment in return to us that our business counts on them being here. And we've had good luck with it. We've had retention bonuses in the past that are, $1 for every hour that you work. That always, provided you stay till your date of commitment. That always works really well. We also try to afford them time when we are the most staffed in July to take vacations then. I tell students, we have the most Americans now. When we get to late August, our Americans are going to be in football camp and back at school and off to college. So if you want to go somewhere, do it in July. We can absolutely accommodate you. So we try to, encourage them to plan when we can cover those absences. And again, we just try to make it fun. Lots of things at the end of the season, final parties, and things that are social that they don't want to miss. And so we've found that that's really helpful to keep folks around, and even to get some of our Americans back on the weekends once they're at school, planning that, fear of missing out event. So we know we all have that. So
Denise, since I was a general manager of a park, and that's a long time ago, we've seen the operating seasons more or less compress. We're seeing some extension now with post and some preseason, primarily post with Halloween and Christmas events, things like that. How do you see the changing school year, and how does the industry, in your discussions on committees, how do you see that changing school year, where we used to be the season, the big part of the season in the Greenfield big theme parks started early in June and went through Labor Day, and now we see the schools getting out later, going back earlier, changing a little bit this year because of COVID, but it's taken those peak periods of our season that used to be 8-12 weeks and compressed them into maybe 6-8 weeks, and those lines are straighter. How do you see that what's happening in the schools affecting our industry?
Yeah, the school calendar is a big concern for our industry, and something that IAPA has identified and works with in the states. We need to ensure that we keep a more traditional school calendar. Research has shown that the students actually don't benefit from the year-round school, but in addition to having it be detrimental to our hiring, it impacts our visitation as well, because when kids are in school, families aren't taking vacations, so we don't have enough workers, we don't have the visitation, and it's really not benefiting the students academically in the long run. So it's really a matter of sharing that with state legislatures to continue to ensure we don't see this shrinking of the calendar, more so than we already have. And in areas where it has shrunk, trying to fight that to increase it back to a more traditional schedule.
Yeah. And is IAPA actively lobbying against that, or
Yes,
not against, but lobbying that issue?
Yes, that's one of IAPA's main issues. We go through annually and look at issues impacting the industry, and that's certainly been identified as one that's very concerning for lots of our members.
Incidentally, our good friend David Mant at IAPA, he just sent in a note to you, and he said the RWS is www.experiencerws.com.
Excellent. Thank you.
www.experiencerws.com. So we're happy to make that plug simply because it can help our industry. And here's another one from you, somebody I think you may know. It says from Judith, "Hey Jersey girl, will Morey's require proof of vaccination?"
For our employees, I'm assuming that's the question. No, we are encouraging employees to get it. We participate with, we worked with US Wellness, and we have a pre-shift survey. All our employees pull it up on their phone in the morning. They go in and they do a risk assessment based on health questions and activity questions. And once they're vaccinated, they put that in and they upload the picture, and then it changes the questions, because the questions are different if you're vaccinated. And so we take that risk assessment each day, and if someone has an intermediate or high, they can't come on site. They have to wait for HR to call them, and then we'll go through what the issues are and make a determination if they can come in, stay home, get a test, what the next action should be. But in terms of vaccination, my understanding is the EEOC has indicated that businesses can require it. At this point, we have decided not to, but we're encouraging folks to get it, and we can monitor in our health program how many people have, and we're really tracking with great participation in that. I think folks generally, want to get the vaccine. They don't want to risk being exposed, have to quarantine for 2 weeks, be home. So we're seeing good participation from our employee population.
I know one of the things that you had to call an audible on at Morey's last season was the gate. You went to, I think, was it the first time in history that you went to a quasi or maybe full gated attraction. Tell us a little bit about that, because that was certainly a major audible, a major change for your company. And is it something that you'll continue on during this period we're living and working in, or will it go on forever? What do you think?
Yeah, so our water parks have been gated, but our piers have always been,
Yeah.
walk on, walk off. You can pay with tickets, you can get a wristband. So it's a unique model. It's an older model, but it works. We had talked previously about potentially putting a gate in, maybe 20 years ago when I first came on full time with the company, and there was a lot of pushback. People feel like this is a public space. Our guests, feel an ownership and they want to come and go as they can. Now, this past year, of course, with having capacity restrictions, we had to put a gate up because you had to have some way to monitor and control admission. So people were understanding of that. We thought we would do a reservation system, and you could, reserve and guarantee your time into the park, in addition to your, your tickets. And what we found was that, people were reserving times when they didn't need to be. So they were paying extra money, and the park wasn't as crowded. And it really wasn't, in the guests' favor. And so we didn't have a lot of people actually taking advantage of it. Most people were just doing walk up and standby. So we just, scrapped the reservations, because the name of the game in the COVID time is pivot and nimble. So you gotta, be looking at what you're dealing with and not be afraid to make a change. So we scrapped the reservations. We just did the standby, and and it worked out well for our guests. We will have the gate as long as we have capacity restrictions, because we have to know how many people are in the park. Whether or not it goes beyond that, I think that's still something, that the leadership team here will have to discuss and see. There's elements of it that are nice. We can actually pinpoint how many people are on the property at a time. And, but we want to ensure that, we remain true to our consumers and our brand. And we like that people have that affinity and that feeling that we're, a part of their community and they can come up and walk on. So we have to be really careful how we think about positioning that in the future.
Well, we had Ken Whiting on from Santa Cruz, as you know, earlier on the podcast, and we talked about that out at Santa Cruz and how adjustments they had to make. Now, that was probably 2.5 months ago, maybe, or 3, that we had him on. So, going to be interesting. I hope to get Ken back on when he becomes chairman, and get him in to talk a little bit more. But a couple of more things that I really wanted to get into today, and we got time is really blowing by here fast. It's crazy. The PPP, as we know, saved a lot of businesses in companies. And based on our research here at ITPS, we saw that amusement and theme parks received about 2,100 plus loans through the PPP, and which amounted to about $328 million. That was through the end of December, so that doesn't even include this second round, which they really haven't published yet. So back, if you take that and average it out, it works out to about 153,000 per organization. For some, that may have been large. For some, that may have been small, but it was important. So I'd like for you to talk about that, and then I'd like to segue in, Denise, into the ERTC, the Employee Retention Credit Program, and talk about that. I think that's lesser known, at least from my discussions with people. So maybe if you would talk a little bit about PPP and the importance of that, and anything you want to contribute, and then let's kind of move into the ERTC side.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, Dennis, you're right. PPP was a lifeline to a lot of smaller organizations. And I think it was really vital to keeping people, going last year, and keeping people on payroll, and, a great program. The problem is, our more medium-sized businesses, large businesses, and even how some of our small businesses are viewed. So PPP eligibility is primarily based on headcount. And our businesses, like just to use Morey's as an example, or even let's talk about Holiday World for a minute. So Holiday World has about 100 full-time employees and about 1,900 or so seasonal. And that blocks them out. That blocks them out of PPP because the way you have to count your employees does not work for businesses, with a lot of seasonal employees and with a lot of temporary employees. And that's something that through IAAPA, we need to continue to stress and impress upon our regulators and legislators that, we are a small business with a small number of year-round career employees, and we swell up in the off seasons, and it can make us look like we're much bigger than we are. But in fact, those are temporary positions, and we really need to be, they really need to understand the plight of the seasonal business and take that into consideration with regulations so that we're not boxed out.
Take off your Morey's hat for a moment. If you Francine Gonzalez was here, she had a lot. She wears a lot of hats, as you may have seen. She did a great job when she was on. And put on your IAPA government relations hat. And what are we doing as an industry and as an association to really ensure that down the road we have this kind of support in the future?
Yeah, I mean, government relations, it's all about building those relationships with your elected officials, with their staff, with folks in various regulatory agencies. So IAPA, I can tell you that the GR folks there and the folks that support them, we're working tirelessly. There so many calls on weekends and nights and meetings. And in 2020, we had over 100 virtual meetings with elected officials or their staff. So, that's a lot. Pressing upon those folks the urgent needs of our industry for relief, for J1s, safety, reopening was huge, having IAPA, put together safe reopening guidelines and got that out. And I know that we use those to frame and shape what we put forward to the governor of New Jersey, as other members did within their states so that we could get reopened. And they continued to work in those states that weren't open and trying to move the needle there. They also work on youth labor laws. We work on ride safety regulations within the states. Right now, our push is to include parks and attractions within the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. So that's a program through the SBA for relief for parks and or for relief for shuttered venues, mostly theaters and performing arts. But we want to get theme parks included in that. So we're working on that right now.
One of the questions that just came in from overseas from Adolfo is, what does IAPA, let me phrase it, how does IAPA support the international government relations as well?
Sure. Each region has a government relations subcommittee, and the staff within those regions work on the issues that are prevalent in those areas. And then, of course, we have a global committee, and we share challenges and directions and successes and information and research, along with that group when we meet. But each region does have GR group of folks that are focused on, the legislative needs in those areas.
Question I have, hitchhiking on that, do we see a lot of differentiation and variance from what we're experiencing domestically to what maybe they're seeing generally in Europe?
I think that obviously there's a lot of different social structures and employment structures. And so some of the things that we may be facing here, like predictive scheduling or minimum wage, that, they may be different issues overseas. But one thing that is, continuous throughout all of our regions is safety and ride regulation and safety. So, the adoption of F24 and having, safety regulations throughout our industry, only help to strengthen the industry and the guest experience and us as operators. So that's obviously a priority for us around the globe.
Here's one for you. This is from Carolyn, and she said, maybe you know her. She said, "We all know the importance of maintaining a culture of trust and support for the overall employee experience. What is the philosophy at Morey's on this approach? What's done to make sure employees feel secure and trusted in employment? What can other parks do?"
I think that our philosophy is to be best in class, to really do the best job that we can to make sure our employees know and feel, genuinely feel that we care about them. And, you show them that. You lead by example, you work side by side, you roll your sleeves up, you're there for them when they need you, you're there for them when they're not working for you. We had a lot of folks who were furloughed or on unemployment last year, when we had the stay-at-home orders in the state. And it was very important to Will and Jack that we be there, Will and Jack Morey, that be there and support our team. And so our human resources department and payroll department had to quickly really get up to speed and become experts in this and become a resource for folks, because across the country we heard lots of issues with unemployment being overwhelmed, and working through our state senator's office and really just being there for employees and being accessible and wanting to help them. And I think people feel that, and they know that, whether it's in adverse situations or in normal operations.
We like to break it up once in a while from the serious to the, this comes in from somebody named Chloe. And she said, Ryan Stana of RWS is a CCM graduate. That's our school here, College Conservative of Music here at UC, taught by the one and only Patty James, who I was kind of instrumental in hiring her mother back at Kings Island, along with Gary Wachs. She said, a nice Cincinnati plug. The James family loves RWS. They do a great job. So I wanted to get that back in because they could help this industry, help offset some of this J1 issue that we're...
Absolutely. I think even without that, putting aside the J1s, we're not hitting our numbers, just with our domestic recruiting. So, the unemployment supplement was 600 last year. It's 300 now. It still continues, like you were saying earlier, about the restaurant manager talking about the $7,500 stimulus payment to one of his employees. And we're competing against that. And teenagers, there's a whole thing about the vanishing teenage worker, because teens are focused now on internships and things that they think will help them get into a better college or get into a better career. And if you look, the number of teens in the workforce has really decreased and is projected to continue to decrease over the next 2 decades. So it's going to be a continued issue.
When we opened Kings Island, which was too long ago, but still one of the greatest parks in the United States and the world. When we hired, personnel fell under me, and we had a 10-to-1 ratio. For every 10 we interviewed, we hired 1. That day is long gone.
Yeah.
Somebody came back to you. Yeah. Somebody came back and they said, Denise, could you come back to the ERTC question again? Could you just explain to us a little bit more about the eligibility process of the employee retention program and what parks can do to qualify and how we can actively move forward on that?
Sure. So the employee retention tax credit was first established in the CARES Act and then reestablished in the Appropriations Act at the end of the year. And so therefore it's in 2 different bills. So it has 2 different qualifications. The first is being under 100 employees for last year. And then that bumped up with this year to 500 employees. So it can be, a little bit different in terms of what credits you can take based on the number of employees that you have.
Okay.
So I would recommend on the IAPA website, we did a webinar on this with them, an accounting firm. And so you can go on that site, go back to the webinars, and there's one on PPP and ERTC, and there's just a wealth of information in there. But it's a really good program that folks should look into. And if you've got PPP, it doesn't exclude you from doing the ERTC, but you want to be strategic about how you go for your forgiveness so you can get the maximum benefit from both. And we do talk about that on the webinar, and folks are, welcome to contact you and email me, and I can point them into direction of some of the SBA guidance.
Okay, great. That's a great suggestion. I know we've learned through our research, and we certainly here at ITPS, we participated in the PPP, that one of the preeminent factors is good record keeping.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you've got it. In the beginning, when they first put the PPP out, hell, nobody knew what was going on, and all this money was flowing, and you thought, boy, I'll get it. Then as it became more gelled, you realized you had to keep good records. And the banks that we were working with, they worked with us to make sure. But I would tell that to all our viewers and listeners who participate, make sure the record keeping is there. Here's another one. It says, Denise, what are you expecting for the 21 season? How much do you think our industry will recover from this last year?
Mm-hmm. I personally am extremely optimistic about visitation demand. I think people have cabin fever. I think they've been cooped up. I think they want to get outside. I think they wanted those things last year, but they were hesitant to do so in places with, crowds. I think this year with vaccine comfort and people feeling, much better about, their health and well-being with the vaccination, that we're going to see an explosion this summer. I think there's going to be such demand, and I not to turn that on a negative, I hope we have the staff so that we can fully that demand and fully recognize the revenue, because we need it for our families to be able to come and make memories. We need it for our employment families so we can economically heal and the businesses can heal and recover. And, it's just going to be a really great opportunity. And I'm very hopeful for a fantastic season.
Well, I think I parallel your thoughts, and I've been saying to the media and to the investment community that it is going to be the Roaring 20s, and we're already seeing that. And we've seen that with the parks that have opened this spring down in Florida, Disney, Universal, SeaWorld. They could have actually packed the parks 3 times more than they were allowed to, which is a good sign. As I said in the hot topics, the airlines and the hotels reservations are popping back up again. So we're seeing that kind of activity where we I think it's still gray for a lot of us, Denise, is that international. Certainly with the problems that are going on in South America, I don't think we're going to see a huge influx to Florida from those markets, like Florida typically does, and actually on the West Coast to California and that destination market, a little more reticent. But domestically, one of the things we're hearing, and we talk to everybody out there globally, this applies in all of the continents, basically, even Australia, our friends down there. They really believe the staycation is in place for this season. And those people who live within those geographic concentric areas that can drive and get there in a day or 4 hours, 5 hours, they're going to do that. And they are going to stay at those facilities in the area. So does that is sort of what Piers and your areas depend on, isn't it? I mean, annually?
Yeah, we're definitely a destination. We're a regional destination where people are driving from North Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, Maryland, and to come here. And we've really seen what we're calling a coastal shift. Folks who had second homes here, stayed here over the winter. People are relocating here for a little bit of I wouldn't say a slower pace of life, but a less congested area. Mm-hmm. And we're bookings right now for the season are extremely strong, through the roof. You can't really find a house to buy in the area.
The B&B is really crazy right now. Yeah, they're saying that they've never been fuller.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the housing market is really strong right now too. Not much more demand than inventory. So I agree with what you've said. I think we're going to see a lot of regional visitation and places that people can drive to and get to easily close to home.
One of the other things we've seen that has come out of COVID, one of the few positive things, is the contactless and the touchless payments. And we were talking about that again with Ken Whiting, and some of our other guests. And we've seen in the companies that report, public companies, the Six Flags and Disney and Cedar, they've all indicated that their in-park spend is up considerably, even with limited capacity. Now, some of that could be because fewer people, but I'm not sure that's really the point. I think it is the contactless and touchless is incentivizing the guest to spend a little bit more. Let's get another beer, let's get another churro, let's get another cotton candy or whatever we're selling. And there, it's kind of like being online and buying. When I'm shopping, I'll buy another shirt while I'm on here, so I don't
Not
have
real
to go.
money.
Yeah, that's right. But are you guys using that at all yet, or sensing that, or did you see any increase in per capita spend?
Yeah,
So far?
it's a really interesting topic. Actually, just we were out to dinner last night, and this came up. We were having a nice dinner with Jim Pattison. He was talking about
Who?
cashless with Jim Pattison.
Who?
Jim Pattison,
Thank you.
future ITPS I'm4FUN podcast.
He's coming on. We'll talk about him in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
What were you saying? What was the topic?
Well,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
we're talking about the cashless and how, how he's moved kiosks into a bunch of his attractions, and the preference for people to make their purchases that way. We're a little different here. We definitely have seen more cashless. We have some to-go ordering. We've done touchless with our menus in our restaurants, things like that. But in this area of the country, right where we are, cash is still important. It's still probably about 50% of our revenue, structure between credit and cash. So while we do have, Apple Pay, and you can do those things, we still do see quite a bit of cash here. But I do think as an industry trend, and I know me personally, when I can just order my lunch and drive by the Wawa and somebody brings it out to me, and I didn't have to, take out my wallet and stand in line and do any of that stuff. There's a real convenience to it.
Well, COVID has changed the way people respond to that, and it has accelerated throughout the industry the technology. We're seeing that, and the use of it, the development of the technology, the use of it by parks, attractions, piers, water parks are using it, and for sure it's here to stay. I mean, we know that, and be interesting. Guess what?
Yeah, our time is up.
I've got two big screens full of questions for you, and what we'll do, Denise, is we always ask our guests, Pam and Sean, our team here, will send you those that we couldn't get to, and if you'd be so kind to get those answers back to us kind of quickly, we'll put those in the ITPS Daily News. And
you're giving me homework, Dennis.
You give me a little homework, yeah. But you get an A for today. How's that?
Okay.
Actually, A plus. So,
all right. Well, thank
you. I really want to thank you for coming on, and you're, as I said at the top of the podcast, it couldn't have been a more timely discussion. Couldn't have had a better person on to discuss it with your background, your affiliation with Morey's and with IAPA, and what you've learned and what you've done. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming guest on May the 5th. We have two industry veterans from the Asia Pacific region coming on. We have Mario Mammon, a good friend. He's going to be on, and former chairman of IAPA. And we have Richard Koh from Malaysia, a longtime friend of mine and a great guy and a very active member of IAPA, and certainly a very, very steeped in the Asian industry, and I really want to get into that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Then we've got two fun guys coming on. We've got Jim Futrell and Tim O'Brien. They're going to join me together, and we're going to talk about the history of the amusement industry, and I'm sure there's going to be some really fun stories with those two guys. Can't wait for that. And as you pointed out, Denise, we have Jim Pattison, president of Ripley's Entertainment, coming on. Probably not a more well-known guy in the industry than Jim. I always used to say it's kind of nice to have a Jim Pattison. He's the only guy I know that travels more than I do. Maybe Keith James, but but the three of us, we probably been to the moon about 60 times, I'm sure. So we're really looking forward to having Jim Pattison come on. I always like to end up saying, if we don't have fun, how can we sell fun? It's what we do. It's what it's all about. And we're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. I've lost 3 friends in the last 3 weeks, 1 to COVID and 2 to other issues, and it brings that point closer to home. And we live and we work in a great industry. We don't put smoke in the skies. We don't pollute the streams and rivers. At the end of the day, what do we really do? We put smiles on people's faces and we make memories. And it doesn't get any better than that. So, Denise, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody out there, thank you. We had great attendance today, Denise, and I'm sure they enjoyed hearing what you had to say. Please give my regards to Will and Jack and the family up there and tell them I said hello and hope you have a wonderful 2021, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye, everybody. Thank you.